Throughout the 20th century, Kingston was a world-famous centre of military aircraft design and production. The company, founded by Thomas Sopwith in 1912, became hawkers after the First World War and part of British Aerospace in 1977, before finally closing in 1992. This is the story of Kingston's aircraft industry, from its earliest pioneering years through the two world wars and into jet age and beyond. A succession of outstandingly successful fighter aircraft were conceived, designed and built in Kingston. No other town in Britain can claim so many aviation firsts. It is also the story of Brooklands, the home of British motorsport and aviation, from where the Sopwith and Hawker companies flew their aircraft, as there was never an airfield in Kingston. But of all the achievements, arguably the finest was the creation of the Hawker Hurricane, which played a crucial role in the Battle of Britain, and led its designer, Sidney Cam, to be hailed as the man who saved Britain. John Fotzard, Harrier chief designer, said of this time, "I believe Cam, with his small team of the mid-1930s, working in shabby premises in a run-down Kingston backstreet, changed the course of history in 1940, and thus preserved our way of life and civilization." It is a story which traces the rise of the British aircraft industry, capturing the glamour and excitement of flying in its pioneering years, and of an outburst of engineering innovation which led to Britain having a world lead in aviation at the end of the Second World War. It also traces the decline of the industry in the second half of the 20th century via the stormy relationship between private enterprise and government. Today, all the great names of British aviation have long disappeared, and the industry is a fraction of its former size. It is the story of the local men and women who worked for the Sopwith and Hawker companies, who built the aircraft and gained their livelihoods from the firm that was for many years the largest employer in the borough, and the story of two particular men and how together they shaped the success of the company. Tom Sopwith, the aviation pioneer who became its guiding hand, and Sidney Cam, the engineering design genius. Above all, it is the story of the most remarkable engineering innovation that took place in Kingston, and of the impact it had on the world. From the earliest biplanes, to monoplanes, to jet aircraft, to the extraordinary vertical takeoff and landing Harrier jump jet. From Bat Boat to Red Arrows. It began with Thomas Octave Murdoch Sopwith, the youngest of 8 children from a well-to-do family of a mining engineer living in Kensington. Thomas Sopwith had enough money to indulge his passion for all things mechanical. He enjoyed motor racing at Brooklands, sailing in the Channel, and finally discovered the exhilaration of flying. In 1910 he bought a Howard Wright Avis monoplane for £630, built under a railway arch in Battersea. There were no flying schools. You got into the aircraft and took off. Sopwith's first flight lasted for 300 yards and ended with a minor crash. Nevertheless, he persevered, becoming the 31st person in Britain to qualify for a Royal Aero Club Aviator's Certificate. He soon became a pioneer of British aviation, holding distance and endurance records. He took a Howard Wright biplane to America and won prize money in competitions there. He would often fly from Brooklands to Datchet, near Windsor, for coffee with his sister May, usually landing on the golf course. This came to the attention of King George V, who invited Sopwith to Windsor Castle. On the 1st of February 1911, he took off from Brooklands and later landed on the East Lawn to be greeted by the royal family. The same day, back at Datchet Golf Course, Sopwith was seen for the first time by an 18-year-old called Sidney Cam, who was just beginning to design model airplanes and gliders. The next obvious step was to teach others to fly. Sopwith set up his flying school in 1912 at Brooklands using prize money he had won in America. The Army was beginning to take an interest in aviation, and officers wishing to fly were encouraged to gain their aviator's certificate at one of the private flying schools at Brooklands. The standard charge for a course was £75. The lessons were given by Sopwith and fellow pioneer pilot Fred Raynham. Fred Sigrist, one of 13 children from a poor family in the Channel Islands, became the school's mechanic. Originally the engineer of Sopwith's boat, he now set about maintaining the aircraft. Fred Sigrist was a natural as an engineer. Sopwith said of him, "Sigrist was all practical, no theory. He never went to school." The most notable student of the school was Hugh Trenchard, who became a pilot in the Royal Flying Corps and later founded the Royal Air Force. Sopwith taught him to fly and recalled that he tackled the task with a wonderful spirit, although he had severe reservations about Trenchard's skills at the controls. The Australian Harry Hawker appeared at Brooklands in 1912. Taken on as a mechanic, he paid for a flying course and became the star pupil. He soon made his name as a test and competition pilot, holding British speed, altitude and endurance records. Sopwith quickly recognised that of the two, Hawker was the better pilot, and he became one of the most famous airmen of the early years of flying, well known for his risk-taking and good luck as well as skilled test flying. He survived hair-raising accidents, including one where he fell out of an aircraft in mid-air at Brooklands. His nickname amongst the public was "the man who won't be killed." The aircraft available at the time was so poor that Sopwith concluded he could build better machines himself. Fred Sigrist devised the hybrid, using an old engine and parts from other aircraft. The hybrid was then bought by the Admiralty for £900. It was used to fly to Whitstable, land on the beach, and pick up oysters for the officers' mess. Overnight, the Sopwith team had become approved aircraft manufacturers, and orders started coming in. The sheds at Brooklands were too small for the demand, and Sopwith sought larger premises. With the money from the sale of the hybrid, he took over the roller skating rink in Canbury Park Road, Kingston, in 1912, as the base of operations for the newly formed Sopwith Aviation Company. Kingston was an ideal location for aircraft construction, as there were many carpenters and other skilled workers available, many having gained their skills in the coach building trade. The proximity to Brooklands was also important. In 1912 there were few cars on the roads, and new aircraft could be trucked the 13 miles to the airfield. However, the local constabulary did not like large objects, like aircraft, on the roads, so it was usually necessary to send out scouts to plan a route that would avoid the police. A third factor was the proximity to the Thames. Sopwith's first love was the sea, and his company from the beginning had planned to build seaplanes. Aircraft were taken from the factory to the river for taxiing and flotation testing. The Thames was in effect used as the company's runway. The requirements for constructing aircraft were uninterrupted open space and a level wooden floor. A roller skating rink was ideal for this. However, the rink, as it became known, retained reminders of its previous use, and workers were reminded by a notice to skate slowly. The skating rink doorboy was kept on as the tea-boy for the new firm. Known to all as Buttons, Jack Whitehorn earned £0.50 a week and eventually retired at 74, the longest-serving employee in the company's history. New aircraft were developed in the rink, with designs simply chalked out on the wooden floor. The Sopwith Bat boat was to become the first successful British flying boat. This aircraft was displayed at the Olympia exhibition in 1913, although it nearly did not get out of the factory. Nobody had measured the height, and it was too tall to get through the door. Part of the outside wall had to be demolished as a result. Piloted by Hawker, the Bat boat won the £500 Mortimer Singer Prize for the first practical amphibious aircraft. This involved operating the aircraft from both land and water while carrying an official observer. On the strength of this performance, Winston Churchill ordered a Bat boat for £1,500 on behalf of the Admiralty for the Royal Naval Air Service. The larger and more powerful Bat boat too was also ordered by the Navy and attracted orders from the German Navy as well. The first time the company received an order from overseas. The trio of Sopwith, Hawker and Sigrist at the centre of the company became known as the Gang. Together they produced a flow of creative ideas that provided a recipe for success for Sopwith Aviation. Sopwith was the manager with business acumen and also the ability to bring out the latent talents of his staff. Sigrist was chief engineer, with an eye for mechanical detail. He ran the factory with a rod of iron, tolerating no slackness and not even permitting tea breaks. Hawker, in addition to his test and demonstration flying duties, contributed to designs and was in charge of the fitters. It was a company run on enthusiasm, but which nevertheless developed a series of new types of aircraft, often just from sketches, discussions, and verbal instructions. Piloted by Hawker, Sopwith aircraft continued winning competitions and creating British aviation records. In 1913, the Daily Mail sponsored a Circuit of Britain race with prize money of £5,000. Hawker made 2 attempts at this with his Sopwith float plane. At the second attempt, and as the last standing competitor, he managed a very creditable 1,043 miles before crashing. He gained national publicity and a reward from Lord Northcliffe, the owner of the Daily Mail. In the winter of 1913, Harry Hawker decided to visit his parents in Australia and to combine this with a sales tour for the company. This established a pattern in the company where the test pilots doubled as demonstrators and sales promoters. For transport to Australia, the smallest possible 2-seat aircraft was designed, principally inspired by Hawker. It was nicknamed the Tabloid, after some small medical pills then in circulation. The tiny aircraft was an immediate success, both for its speed and all-round performance. It astounded testers at Farnborough by climbing at a rate of 1,200 feet per minute. The Tabloid could fly at 92 miles per hour, a speed unheard of in those days. It was the precursor of the first Sopwith fighter, but before that it became famous as a racer. Fitted with floats, the Tabloid was tested on the Thames and entered for the famous Schneider Cup air race, to be held at Monte Carlo in April 1914. Having sorted his road problems out with the police, Sopwith now fell foul of the Thames Conservancy Board, who objected to aircraft testing on the river between Kingston Bridge and Teddington Lock. The solution to the problem was to move the testing downstream to Richmond, where the river was under the jurisdiction of the Port of London Authority, who were much more cooperative. The Schneider Trophy was the most prestigious international air race of its day and attracted entries from all the major countries involved in aviation. The French and Americans then had the world lead. British aviation, by comparison, was in a backwater. The majority of entries were monoplanes, so when Sopwith entered with a biplane it was thought this must be a joke. Nobody thought a biplane could race a monoplane and expect to win. Nevertheless, on the 20th of April 1914, the tabloid, piloted by Howard Pixton, outclassed the opposition from the rest of the world to win the trophy. The Schneider Trophy was less a race than a speed competition around a timed course which Pixton flew at an average speed of 86 miles per hour, some 20 miles per hour faster than anyone else. He then flew 2 further laps at an average speed of 92 miles per hour. The tabloid thus became the fastest seaplane in the world and also gained the world floatplane speed record. It was a triumph. The French in particular were astounded that the British biplane could fly so much faster than their best monoplanes. This was the first time a British aeroplane had been successful on the international stage, putting British aviation firmly on the map. The victory also established the ascendancy of the biplane over the monoplane for the next 20 years. The tabloid created the template for the generations of single-seat fighters to come, which became Kingston's stock in trade. Howard Pixton, however, remained unaffected by his sudden celebrity. When Jacques Schneider offered to fill the trophy with the best French champagne for him to drink, Pixton replied, "No, thank you. Mine's a small bass." Government interest in the company's aircraft increased, and Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, paid a visit to the Kingston factory in 1914. Later he was given his first flight in the Sociable, a larger version of the tabloid. Orders now came into the factory in greater numbers, particularly from the Royal Naval Air Service, and production in the rink became overcrowded. A military version of the tabloid was developed and ordered by the RNAS for use around the coast on anti-submarine and anti-airship patrols. They were trucked directly to RNS stations by road. On the eve of the First World War, the workforce had grown to 150, but the company also experienced its first fatality. A Sopwith seaplane being tested near Southampton crashed into the water, and the test pilot was drowned.